You know, sometimes I get the funny feeling that people think libertarianism is selfish. God damn it. You know, I'm a Hitchens fan on all things atheism and anti-theism. The man was a legend. I enjoy a lot of his work. I read a lot of his books. But this has to be one of Hitchens' all-time worst quotes in my book. Not just because I'm a libertarian and I object to his position here, but because it's such a lazy, base-level bitch thinking that I would typically expect from a random Twitter egg with like 3 followers, or maybe some uber-progressive Bernie voter. It's beneath a man of Hitchens' intellect. But Hitch certainly wasn't alone in this critique, especially in atheist circles.
Hey, here are 5 stupid things I've noticed about libertarianism. It's selfish.
Now, this is the level of absurdity I would expect from Steve Shives, though this is before Shives went completely off the deep end with his social justice warrioring, as you can tell because this is still called 5 Stupid Things. For those of you who aren't aware, Steve later renamed this segment to Facepalm 5 because the word stupid is too offensive. But hey man, it's been a long time since I've seen this video. Maybe he makes some decent points.
Libertarianism, like most political philosophies, is an old house with many rooms.
Oh, and already right off the bat we gotta stop you there, Steve. You know, he hasn't said anything wrong yet. Granted, it's only been 3 seconds. But the caption he has on his screen of this greedy capitalist hoarding his own property like a madman. It's mine, you can't have it. This reminds me of the famous Thomas Sowell quote about how he says, "I have never understood why it's greed to want to keep the money you've earned, but not greed to want to take someone else's money." That's the heart of libertarianism. It's just property rights, man. We're not saying we can't get along and we can't coexist and we can't pitch in to make things better for each other. We're saying you don't have a just claim to my property. That goes for anybody. But property rights are the centerpiece of libertarianism. And it doesn't just mean, you know, my car, my house, a portion of my paycheck. It's your rights to own yourself. Your rights to own the fruits of your labor. Your rights to not be exploited by force of the state. That's just the heart of libertarianism.
The defining characteristic of this form of libertarianism is selfishness. Libertarian thinkers and politicians, note the distinction, are capable of reciting some very impressive sounding rhetoric about individual liberty and freedom of association, but it all reduces to this: I want to be left alone, and I want things my own way. Just think how many resentful 5-year-olds are libertarians without even realizing it.
I want to be left alone. I want things my own way. Well, for starters, that applies to everyone regardless of their spot on the political spectrum, Steve. As Milton Friedman once so eloquently put it, greed is just an individual seeking their own personal interest. You're doing that, I'm doing that, everyone is doing that. I do want to be left alone, just like any other person who doesn't want aggression or an imposition placed upon them. And if by I want things my own way, you mean I want to live my life without a mob of my fellow citizens empowering an authoritarian state to seize my earnings or ban things that I like? Yes, I want things my own way. Here's the difference though, Steve. I'm not imposing anything on you with my ideas. It's not an imposition on leftists or progressives to say you don't have a justification to seize my property or empower a state to steal my property just to fund the goodies that you want. One of us is selfish here, Steve, and it's not the libertarians. Look, Steve goes into more takes on libertarianism, but they stray too far from our point here about whether or not libertarianism is selfish. Steve actually goes on to make an argument about Ludwig von Mises that suggests Mises just made all this shit up, and that it has no grounding in actual economics. Which, if you know anything about the Austrian school, how Mises predicted the Great Depression due to credit expansion in the 20s, how communism couldn't calculate values without the price system, etc., you'll know how laughably retarded that statement is. But to stick to the topic of libertarianism and selfishness, let's look at Bill Maher for a moment.
New rule: libertarians have to stop ruining libertarianism.
You know you're getting into some ridiculous takes on libertarianism when Paul fucking Ryan has his picture next to Ron Paul. Look, I know Paul Ryan praised Ayn Rand at one point and the left used it as a cudgel to beat him with, but Paul Ryan isn't even in the conservatarian sphere of politics. He's a straight-up corporatist Republican. Reading Atlas Shrugged doesn't make you a libertarian. The man has some extensive voting records for big spending, war support, and liberty restrictions. Rand Paul, on the other hand, holds a fair ranking in my book of conservatarian. Rand has some strong libertarian leanings, and in my opinion is the only person in the modern system even halfway worth a damn. But Ron is the only actual libertarian in this picture. Ron is the fucking goat. Point is, you're not making an honest critique of libertarianism if you're using Paul Ryan as an example. That's like me critiquing progressives by using Hillary Clinton as a punching bag.
Or at least do a better job of explaining the difference between today's libertarian and just being a selfish prick.
Ayn Rand is a go-to for a lot of lefties critiquing libertarianism, and to some extent I can understand it. Ayn is easily both misunderstood and flawed. She opposed libertarianism, actually, and her philosophy of objectivism shares similar stances but holds strong oppositions to common libertarian ideas. Charity is frowned upon in objectivism, for example. Altruism is considered immoral in objectivism, and on the surface it's easy to dismiss this as selfishness in a negative sense. But Rand's point is a bit deeper, whether you agree with it or not. Her point is that living for others has resulted in a society of collectivism, at the expense of the individual. Her point being that your life is too special and too important to make your main focus about others instead of living for and loving yourself. I contrast this with a more Rothbardian take on libertarianism, where charity is looked upon as being just fine, but the real issue is property rights. But when Bill talks about how libertarianism morphed into something different, he's just dead wrong. It's not about getting government off your back for things A, B, and C. It's about your right to self-ownership and your right to live without coercion over your life as long as you're not infringing on others. That includes your medicine cabinet and what you do as consenting adults in your bedroom, but it isn't restricted to that. Libertarianism didn't change, Maher. You never understood it. At least understand what something is before you shit all over it. So look, there's a never-ending stream of these critiques, and perhaps I'll tackle a few more in the future. I did stumble across an old Cult of Dusty video I remember from back in the day where he discusses his beefs with libertarianism, and I might just have to cover that. But until next time, I'm out of here, but always remember, libertarianism is just where you end up if you consistently apply principles of property rights and non-aggression.